great to see the League of Women Voters alive, well, and I would have to say vibrant. You may not know this, but I cut my political eye teeth in the League of Women Voters. I was a 20-year-old living in Washington, D.C. with an infant child. And I said, you know, infancy is great, but it's not enough. And I remembered that my mother had been an active member of the League of Women Voters. So I called the local chapter and I signed myself up. And then when we moved to Chicago, I joined the Chicago League. I became the editor of the Voter and a vice president. I learned a variety of things in the League. In Washington, we then were talking about tax structure. And just as a footnote, I should tell you that I still serve on the House Revenue Committee. And one of the items was the question whether there was some room for a sales tax in the District of Columbia. And it was, as usual, a very interesting League discussion, because there was, of course, a concern that sales taxes are not particularly progressive. On the other hand, there was a recognition that the demographics of the district population were becoming increasingly low income, and that a lot of the people who buy things in the District of Columbia are tourists. So it was just an interesting reminder of how the League operates. And in fact, the two things I took away from the League of Women Voters, three. First of all, the importance of voter registration and voter participation. Democracy is not, as we say, a spectator sport. But second, public policy really is about real people making real decisions, analyzing issues, discussing, coming to consensus. We don't join the League because we've already signed up to say no drilling in Anwar. We don't join the League because our only issue is handgun control at the local level. We join the League because we want to learn more about the public policy choices that confront us, and we want to work together to study, to analyze, and to come to consensus. To me, it was important to make that discovery about this organization because it helped me understand that I not only could, but should participate fully in the democratic institutions of our polity. The second thing I learned from the League of Women Voters was perhaps not so helpful. It was be on time for meetings. And I have to tell you, that has not served me well over the years. If they say 8 o'clock, I'm there, but then I wait for half an hour cooling my heels until everybody else shows up. So I don't know whether you've changed, whether you figured out a way to let people know they don't have to be on time, but you should just know that that did not turn out to be a great plus in my political life. Pat Quinn the other day said, as he took over the helm of Illinois government, the ordeal is over. And I think that is really a fair statement. In fact, if I could just take one moment. On December 15th, Monday, December 15th, I was in Springfield as a member of the Electoral College. As you know, the Electoral College meets not in Washington, but each group meets in its own state capital. And I was one of the 21 electors from the state of Illinois. We met in the recently renovated State Senate chamber where Barack Obama had plied his trade. And it was an elegant, wonderful ritual ceremony in which our 21 votes went in the ballot box, sending Barack finally to the presidency of the United States. It was a moment of euphoria. It was a moment totally sublime. An hour later, I was part of a press conference announcing the creation of the Special Investigative Committee into the question of impeaching Rod Blagojevich. You can imagine how that felt from the top of the world to the bottom within the passage of a single 60-minute period. So I'm with Pat Quinn. The ordeal is over, but that only means that now it's time to go back to work and get the job done. I'd have to tell you that the most serious problems facing the state of Illinois today are fiscal problems. The state is not in good fiscal health. And in fact, the latest projections, and these are based on December numbers, so they're likely to get worse before they get better. The latest projection is that in the current fiscal year, we are looking at the likelihood of almost a $3 billion deficit. That isn't a deficit when we start making the budget for next year. That's the shortfall between spending this year and the actual revenues that we anticipate will be available to cover it. 2.8 billion is the actual number, but it could well be 3, it could be more than that before the fiscal year is over. The context is that our general state revenues are about 28 billion. That's what we projected at the beginning of the fiscal year. And 28 billion, you can see, 28 billion, 2.8 billion, we're looking at about a 10% reduction in our ability to meet our responsibilities. And it's important to know that those are not just abstract numbers. It isn't, oh yeah, there's a 10% deficit, you know, okay. But what that translates to is all kinds of people out in the real world who are not getting their reimbursements, not getting their payments in a timely fashion from Illinois state government. So the RTA, for example, and downstate mass transit districts have not got the money owed them since the beginning of this fiscal year. People who serve the state's poor in the Medicaid program, pharmacists, doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, they're waiting ever longer for their bills to be paid. And the consequence is not just how does that doctor make payroll if not getting reimbursed by the state, but the risk is that a lot of these institutions and individuals will say, I don't want to take care of the state's clients. So we've always had a problem in making sure that medical providers will treat the poor, but that problem is way exacerbated when we can't even say, but yeah, you get a legitimate payment at the end of the day, if that payment is first of all low, and second, so slow that the provider doesn't know where to turn. Vendors in the state prisons, you know, the people who provide food to nursing homes and prisons. So it's important to know that we can put a face on the meaning of a $2.8 billion deficit. So this is real and earnest, and it could well become larger as the rest of the fiscal year unfolds. These numbers, as I say, come from the end of December, and I am sure that January receipts are going to be even worse. And when we think about not only how we figure out what to do with this fiscal problem, but what the meaning will be for the coming fiscal year, 2010, we know that we're going to start that year owing almost $2 billion more to the state pension program under legislation that was adopted more than 10 years ago. So the responsibilities will not decrease. It isn't just, oh, if we're spending 28 billion this year, that's what we have to spend next year. Other prices, other issues can make the costs next year even higher, including, as I say, the required pension payment. And if you think about what the economy is doing to real people in the real world, unemployment is up, the need for services from state government, whether it's emergency shelter, whether it's Medicaid because people who lose their jobs lose their health insurance. So effectively, the actual costs of providing government services, in my view, are likely to escalate and make whatever problems we have in this fiscal year much worse by the time we come to plan next year's budget, which, as you know, begins July 1st.